If you ever want to get bad advice, just tell a real estate agent that you're buying land. It works like a charm. Because the minute that you tell them that you're buying land in a certain market, when you ask them how much you should pay or how much land is worth, the first thing that they're going to ask you is, how many acres are you buying? What they're going to explain to you after that is that in every local market, there's this thing called price per acre. It works very straightforwardly. For example, in a certain market, acres are going for about $15,000. That's the price per acre, you see? So if you were to buy a 5 acre property, all you have to do is multiply the price per acre times the number of acres that you're buying. So that's $15,000 times 5 acres. That means that that land is worth $75,000. And if you want to buy 10 acres, it's the same exact thing, except you just double it, and that's 150,000. Because in a marketplace where you're buying acreage has a price. But the problem with that concept, like so much of the conventional wisdom that you're going to hear about in the land market, is it's fatally flawed. It's completely erroneous. And if you follow the herd and if you follow that bad advice, you're going to get into big trouble. Because the reason why is that size has very little to do with the value of land. And all else being equal, sure, if you have a bigger property, same neighborhood, same qualitative features, same topography, same soil conditions, same location, sure, bigger is better if all else is equal. But without the surrounding context, you don't really have enough information to tell you that acreage is going to drive the value of that property. Because if you look at acreage alone, you're going to get led down the wrong path. In fact, a lot of times, smaller land is actually going to be better land. Reminds me of that old saying that good things come in small packages. You ever hear that one? The idea behind that saying is not to say that something that is small is good versus something that is big is bad. It's not that small is inherently good. The reason that people say that is because small implies quality. Because when you actually have something of real quality, you don't need a lot of it. Because when it comes to the game of quality, a little bit goes a long way. Because it's quality that determines the value of something, not size. And in the land game, it's exactly the same because no amount of quantity is going to make up for any amount of quality. Because quality is absolute, quality is irreplaceable, and in the land game, quality reigns supreme. In this video, we're going to cover is what makes land valuable in the marketplace, why acreage matters less than you think, why smaller properties tend to have greater quality than larger properties, how to determine the size of the land that you actually need when you're buying property, and how to find the right property in the right location and ideally at the right price too. Now, to understand the basic backdrop of what drives value for vacant land, why some land is worth more than other land, it's very simple. I want you to imagine that you and I work for a newspaper and we're two sales agents selling newspapers. Well, let's say that we're assigned two different territories and I get the location in the central business district, outside of all the skyscrapers, outside of City Hall, in the middle of all the activity of the hustle and bustle of the city, and I'm selling papers there. Now, you have another territory, but the problem is you're 20 miles outside the city, and where you're located, there's not a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of business. It's in a rural market or a suburban market outside of the central business location. Now, you may be a better sales rep than me. You might be a better sales rep than I am. But here's the thing. Even if you are, I'm still going to make more money than you, because if I walk into traffic, I'm going to get hit. And if I stand on a corner where people want to buy newspapers, I'm going to sell newspapers. And it doesn't matter how much you jump up and down or how much you wave your hands or how much of a connection that you make with the people that you talk to. I'm going to get more at bats. I'm going to get more traffic. I'm going to sell more newspapers and I'm going to make more money. See, the idea is that some property, some land has what's called locational value. This is the idea that there is a surplus value to one location over another location relative to the same underlying business activity. See, if I sell newspapers here versus there versus somewhere else, I'm going to make different amounts of money for the same time, for the same activity, for doing the same work, but my income is going to change from one location to the next. The other idea of this is called economic rent. that's fundamentally for certain commercial activity, for certain activities, certain locations have more value than others. And you're going to make more, money in the central business district in a lot of types of organizations and businesses. I want you to take a look at this map of Knoxville, Tennessee. It's a map of Knox County. And what it shows is the value on a per unit or per acreage basis on average of all the land in all these different locations in and outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. And what you can see is that pound for pound in the central business district location, you have individual parcels that are 1,000 times or more valuable than the same acreage just a couple miles away. So talk about price per acre. Let's see how much that holds up. And that's in the city versus the country in the same metro area. But with rural land, quality isn't just about objective market price or anything like that. Quality is also subjective. In other words, I might like this property more. You might like that property more. But qualitative opinions about the desirability of an individual property, even if they vary from person to person, and they will, what happens is that those opinions still aggregate out into market demand. So even if I agree or disagree with the property that you think is best, the market has a vote. And the people in the market that have demand for some locations, some properties versus others, enforce supply and demand fundamentals into the marketplace that allows you to see based on a quantitative basis, the value, the sale price of an individual property, how much value, how much quality the market actually assigns to that location. To understand why acreage matters a lot less than you think, I'm going to give you an example of why the price per acre concept is a fundamentally flawed concept. And what I'm going to do is I want to show you 4 of the properties that we bought in one particular county, Warren County, North Carolina. This is a rural county on the Virginia border. We've actually bought 8 properties in this county over the years and sold all 8. But I want to show you just 4, like a hand sample of 4, just to illustrate the point here. What I'm going to show you is for each of the 4 properties, what happened when we actually put it on the market. We ran the same marketing systems for all 4 properties. We did it across a similar time period in the same basic market. Not all these properties are right next door to each other. 2 of them are, but in some cases it's a short drive across a county where the rural price points and market dynamics are very similar in like a 20-minute drive radius, which is really what we're talking about. This first one was a 12.74 acre recreational property off of Burchett Road in Manson, North Carolina. 12.74 acre property. We sold this at $37,500. The price per acre was $2,943. This next one was a large residential home site with minor subdivide potential on Warren County Acres Road in a town called Littleton, North Carolina. This was an 8 acre property in size. We sold it at $65,000, which means that the price per acre was $8,125. Next is a manufactured home lot that we sold in Warrenton. The acreage of this property was 3.13 acres. We sold it at $25,000, which means that the price per acre here was $7,987. Lastly is this small rural home site on Burchett Road in Manson, right down the road from the first property that we shared with you. This was a 1.16 acre property that we sold at $19,150, which means that the price per acre of that property was $16,509. So the question that I have, and the question you should have, is if price per acre were actually a reliable concept to value land, then why would one property have a price per acre that is more than 5 times greater than the price per acre of another property a quarter mile away in the same market? How would that make sense? Obviously, it doesn't. And yet, no matter what I say, no matter how much I emphasize this to you, when you go out into the local marketplace, you're going to hear about price per acre all the time from all these types of folks that you are in many cases paying to advise you on how to buy land. You're going to hear it from the tax assessor. You're going to hear it from the appraiser. You're going to hear it from the listing agent. You're going to hear it from the seller. You're going to hear it from your agent, probably the buyer's agent that you actually pay to steer you. But the question is why? How could this be? If the concept is so flawed, then why is it so commonly held to be true? And I want to be gentle when I say this, because look, people work hard. Everyone's out here trying to make it. Like, I'm not trying to throw shade or make people feel diminished for not knowing something. So I want to be respectful. But guys, the reason that they're going to be talking about price per acre is they don't know what they're talking about. Or they've been given the wrong information from others that they learned from, and they never had to do enough transactions to find their way through the reality of what they're talking about. They just fake their way through it. Guys, welcome to America. This is what real estate agents do when it comes to land deals. And I get why they think it. I get why they got it wrong. I mean, the idea is that you're buying acreage in a market. So in a market, if you're buying acreage at 10 grand, and it's like, that means that it's $10,000 per acre. So if you're buying 10 of a thing and the thing costs $10,000, then it would be $100,000 to buy a 10-acre property. But here's the flaw. You're not buying individual acres. You're buying an individual parcel. You're buying an individual property, and the value of a property has very little to do with acreage, as we have touched on in this video. And not only will smaller properties have greater price per acre, but sometimes greater value overall, just on an aggregate level, the property as it stands. See, the biggest driver of the value of a piece of property is the location, because land located in and around a major city will have a more intensive demand in the market for buyers who are interested in owning that specific location. Cities have a gravitational pull, and I want to show you what that does to not only the value of land, but the price per acre of land based on a 1 hour distance of two properties that are 1 hour drive from one another. Let's look at this 47.3 acre property in Gansevoort, New York. This is just north of Albany in upstate New York. 47.3 acres sold at $220,000, which means that the price per acre is approximately $4,651. That's not so bad, is it? It's an agricultural property. You have some farmland in the front and looks like timber, recreational land in the back, some wetlands in the back, but could be good timberland all the same. Now, drive 1 hour south, and I want you to look at this 1.04 acre property on Croton-on-Hudson in Croton-on-Hudson, New York. So this is a property that is a sort of a premium home site. 1.04 acres sold at $900,000, which means that the price per acre at this location is $865,385 per acre. Okay. So the property itself, even though it's like 1/47th the size, it's 4.1 times more expensive overall. And it's 186 times more expensive on a price per acre basis. The reason why is that you have this unbelievable view of the Hudson River, and you have a location that puts you a 45-minute commute away from New York City. And not just the neighborhood values at that location, the demand for that location, the natural features at that location, the privacy at that location, but you can tap into the New York labor market. You can tap into the local economy in New York. See, labor markets are a big driver of land prices, primary driver. Because cities are basically labor markets. People move to the city for jobs. And we'll talk about this in a later section of the video, but 60 minutes is the line in the sand. When you're within 60 minutes of a job, you're within that job market. When an employer, a company is within 60 minutes of certain talent, of certain labor, of certain citizens that live within that 60-minute drive, that is their labor market, okay? So you have a lot of people, bankers, you have a lot of business owners, you have a lot of consultants, you have a lot of attorneys, you have a lot of wealthy people, doctors that would want to live there and commute in and out of New York, or just set up their practice in Westchester outside the city. So the buyer is not paying for acreage. They're not buying the dirt. If they buy the property in Croton-on-Hudson, they're not buying it. They're not buying that 1.04 acre on a commodity farmland basis, a commodity timberland basis. What they're doing is they're paying a premium for location that is irreplaceable, not just in terms of the amenities, but the location to New York. And if the acreage was actually what people were buying, then it wouldn't make sense that they would pay over 186 times for 1 acre more than they paid for another acre if acreage was actually a commodity, but it's not. Land is not a commodity. It is not a conventional commodity asset, as we saw. When I started buying land, nobody told me this stuff. It was so crazy because everybody was telling me, even some of the educators, like, oh, price per acre, price per acre. And it's like, I had to fumble through this thing. I had to take my cuts and bruises in this market with real money to understand that this was all a facade. It's not real. And yet nobody told me this. And so what I try to do is I publish all these videos because I want you to have the information that I never had. People reach out to me and they ask for help in this, and I'm here to help. And that's really what I do. But a lot of times the people that get stuck when they're buying land. So if you're buying land and you're kind of stuck in that process, because you know what the end looks like, you know what happens at the end, but you're lost in the weeds in the middle. And I get all types of questions and comments every day. But what happens is the people that are asking those questions, the reason they're asking the question is because they don't have a fundamental understanding of the land buying process. There's a 6-step system that they haven't learned. It's very simple. It's not that hard to learn. You don't need to be like a 15-year veteran of real estate. You don't need to have any experience at all. You just have to understand there's 6 steps. When you get stuck on one of the steps, you may not know it if you don't know what the steps are. But when you understand how the process works and you feel like you're stuck, well, then you can just go on to what we call the land purchase roadmap, and you can see exactly where you're stuck and localize the issue so that you can get past it and move on and buy that land successfully. Land purchase roadmap is a free link in the description below. And this is just sort of our summary overview of the land buying process. A lot of the people that download the land purchase roadmap are like, hey man, this is great, but I really need a little bit more support. I really need to understand how to do this, because looking at the words on the page is one thing, but then me doing it for the first time is a whole nother thing. And they really want to see what it looks like and get some guidance. So what we did is we built an immersive education product called the Land Purchase Navigator. You can find that on our website. It's everything that you need to do to buy land like a pro, to buy land successfully with no prior experience at all. How to analyze land using online maps, how to know what land is worth, how to negotiate price, how to run thorough due diligence, and how to execute that process successfully at every single phase. It's a 5-hour course. I'm the instructor. It's me. You're working with me, and I will give you every grain of detail you need to be successful. It's all the systems we use. It's the same process we use. And so a lot of times when people come to me, they want to work with me one-on-one. I don't think that they always think in terms of cost. They're just like, oh, he's on the screen and like, I want to work with you because I know you know what you're talking about and blah, blah, blah. See, but what I'm trying to do is I'd have to work in your market. I'd have to be licensed as an agent. It takes multiple years. And then I have to figure out what to charge, but then I have to do that in all 50 states. And then you have to pay more. And then ultimately the big issue is that if you're actually reliant on what I tell you, then no answer will ever be good enough, because you have to be able to identify the qualities of land for yourself. You have to understand how to analyze these properties. It's not hard. And so I just want to encourage you to understand that you have everything you need. Internet connection, you have a YouTube account, like you just go online and get the information. I am here to give you that information. But if you're reliant on others, it's going to be very difficult, because how are other people going to tell you the best land that you want to buy? Because they're not you, you're not them. And so if you have a little knowledge, you don't need to be an expert. You just need a little bit of a foundation here, guys. So, you're going to get the lifetime access to the course. Guys, it's like, oh, he's selling a course. Guys, this is such a gift. Like, guys, like, seriously. Yeah, yes, I am. By the way, of course I'm selling a course. Could you imagine like how crazy this was 20 years ago? Because you couldn't find any information. There's no information. There wasn't any information on this for me 5 years ago. And if it wasn't for this course, guys, like, if it wasn't for the free content or the course, I'm not so confident there would be anything like it 5 years from now. There might not be anyway. I'm so confident in this because I feel like I was put here to do this, at least right now. Because like I am like looking around and I'm not seeing anything that is reliable. I'm not seeing education that you can rely on. I'm not seeing education I can rely on. So I want to give you guys every grain of detail you need to be successful. You don't need me after that. We can work together. You can reach out and we can talk. I'd love to do that. But what I want to do is give you that information that I would give you if we were working one-on-one on a consulting basis. And I want to do it for like 5% of the cost. So I want to give you disproportionate value, plus proprietary systems, the assess environmental analysis framework, crash price analysis, how to know what land is worth in 1 minute or less, puddle pre-closing checklist, how to make sure you're not missing anything, and all the connective tissue of all the supporting concepts that go into it. So guys, this stuff didn't exist until we created it. And we created it for you to be successful, and you can and you will be, because you will be successful more than professional buyers in your market because they don't have the checklist that I'm going to give you here. So one-time payment, lifetime access. If we upload anything in the future, you get that too. You don't have to pay for it. I'm extremely confident in this. And look, no guarantees. Like, mileage may vary. You have to do the work. Like buying land takes risk. It's not all that. There's always issues with any investment, with any type of strategy or project. There's nothing, guys. But if you feel called, like I always wanted to buy property, I'm a land flipper, I want to get started. I want to know how to do this at the highest level. And I want to get 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years out ahead of my learning curve. Guys, the Land Purchase Navigator, this is why I created it. Check it out on our website. I think you're really going to like it. And let's keep moving with the video. So even when you have the same market location, okay, nearby properties, nearby locations, smaller properties are still oftentimes going to have greater quality than larger properties, even in the same market. The reason why is that when people were subdividing land back in the day, if you think about like the past 100 years, it's not like the land game is new. It's like, oh, I saw this YouTuber. It's like people were flipping land in America in like the 1700s. And even then it was old. So they've been doing it in like England and stuff. So when you're thinking about the last 100 years, well, when you look today at the properties in some of these areas, the question is, why are some properties big and why are some properties small? The reason a lot of these properties are smaller is because they're better. And because there was an incentive to divide them. See, the land has quality, either in terms of location, access to utilities, or for example, road frontage, like access to the main roads and thoroughfares, potentially like flatter land, potentially better farmland. And so what ended up happening was you had a lot of these properties that were split up because they had higher quality. So take a look at this. This was a property in Roxborough, North Carolina. We'll look at a couple properties in this area. Person County, not too far from Warren County, where I was buying those properties at the beginning of the video. Here's a 27.22 acre property in Roxborough that sold at $289,000. 4 months on market, which means that's pretty quick. And you see this property on Old Allensville Road. And at 27 acres, if you're going off a price per acre thing, that's over 10K per acre, okay? But let's look down the way. You have a nearby comp sold the same year, sold at a lower price. So this sold at $260,000 and it's 100 acres. This property here is it's like a wooded property, but it looks like they timbered it. So they kind of like clear cut timbered it. And if you look at those little stripes, the trees that are still there on the property, those little veins of what appears to be trees, those are going to be creeks. That's almost always what that is, because you have like trees right around a stream and like you just leave those there. You also have multiple utility easements going through this property, plus a cemetery right in the middle of it. There's like a family cemetery in the middle of the property. So that's not good. Plus you have an easement for ingress and egress for the families. It's just not ideal. Not all the land's usable. A lot of it, most of it might not even be buildable at all. And you have this other one that sold even lower at $245,000, same year. This is 103 acres, 14 months on market. So they squeezed every drop out of the sale price on that one. It's a fully wooded parcel with very small road frontage. It just kisses the road up on the northwest corner there. You have a big transmission line going right through the middle of it. Again, recently timbered property. Again, evidence of wet soil, evidence of streams going through the property. And streams are great for a single family home site, but if you're looking at on a development basis, If you're looking for a large tract development, that's not necessarily what your first choice would be. So, the reason that these bigger properties are bigger, like the one has limited road access, the other has a lot more, it appears. But why weren't they subdivided? Well, the reason that they weren't subdivided is because they lack quality. Because there's not enough development potential and demand and qualitative appeal to the actual land itself to induce a property owner to do the couple $1,000s in surveying to actually get it split. There's no value in it. Because instead of having one timber property, you would have two timber properties, and each of the timber properties would have half the timber. So you're not getting any juice out of the subdivide. They're not good development tracts, so there's really no incentive there. And so that is the idea. The land is not necessarily going to be valued on a residential acreage basis, because if it's not buildable, and maybe these tracts are, but if they are, then there's limitations. So the acreage is going to punch below its weight in terms of what you can actually build on. And if it's not buildable, then they're going to be valued on the basis of commodity timber values. Timber that you can harvest every 25 years, 30 years. I mean, that's what you're really buying. Maybe a campground, maybe something like that. But, that doesn't get you to 500,000, which I'm sure the owners wanted to sell for. When you're buying land, the question is how many acres do you really need? And are all the acres worth the same amount of money? When you ever go to a supermarket and you see in the checkout, the checkout line or whatever, there's that cooler, and you have the 12 ounce cans of Coca-Cola, and they're 99 cents. But you can actually see from the vantage point of that cooler at checkout, you can actually see up the adjacent aisle where you can walk 30 feet away, grab a 12 pack of Coca-Cola, the same exact product, except instead of $1, it's $4.75. The question is why? The answer is diminishing returns. You want that first, you're thirsty, you want that first soda, but then the 10th through 12th, you don't need them as much. You might not want them, you might not want to drink them. They're heavier and bulkier to carry, and the value is in that first one, and maybe the second one a little less, third one a little less. Acreage is the same. You may have a 20-acre property, but what you need is the 1 acre by the road. The 19 acres in the back in the woods, that you might want them for privacy and for many other things, but you don't need them. And you certainly wouldn't pay the same amount on a per acre basis to buy them. A lot of homestead land buyers, people that we interact with and leave comments, people I talk to that are looking for, homestead property, they're I'm looking for 10 to 20 acres, and it's 10 to 20 acres. That's a lot of land. Do you know, have you guys pictured what an acre is? It's a soccer field, roughly. So 10 soccer fields worth of thickly wooded land, or 20. That's a lot, and you're going to pay way more for it. What do you really need? Because if your goal is a homestead or mini farm, even 10 acres is very big for a small homestead. 5 acres is big, and you may just need 2 or 3 acres. But in the same market where you can get 2 or 3 acres for $35,000, 15 acres may cost you $120,000. So is it worth paying the additional $85,000 for land that you're not even sure that you're going to use? If you want to understand quality versus quantity as it relates to acreage, I was staying at this property in Chester County a couple of weeks ago. Now, this is a video I shot on my iPhone, so I'll give you the view from my back porch of this home. Kind of looking up at the house and then turning around. I want to show you kind of orienting over the backyard, panning out towards the creek, because the home sits on a property that backs to a large perennial creek. And you have a jungle gym, you got a fire pit. The backyard is mostly flat, but it runs gently downhill down to the creek. And at one point I knew that the property really ran west. So the yard jutted out to the west along the creek. From the vantage point of the porch, I wanted to use the zoom on my camera because it was a clear day. It was kind of drizzling a little bit, but you could really see across the property. So I wanted to zoom in and use the zoom and see if I could even get to the other side and see the other side of the land. what I saw is like as the camera slowly zoomed, there was a thicket of trees, and then you could see past it to a clearing. Then there was another thicket of trees, and then another clearing. And when you zoom in, it just keeps going and going and going and going to the point where the yard went so far to the west that even on a clear day with a 12x zoom on my iPhone camera, I could barely even see to the other side. And certainly was part of the yard that I like, even when I was hanging out outdoors, like it's like, I'm not going to like go out and walk that whole side of the property. I mean, you certainly can. But the question is like, do you think the quality of this land fundamentally has anything to do with the fact that the land is 3.5 acres versus 2 acres or 1 acre? No, because the main area that I was at is probably like a, 3/4 an acre, the home, and then the part that backs to the creek. What makes the property quality is when you step onto it, you go on the back porch and you see the kayak, you see the fire pit, you see the creek, and you're like, dude, this is it. That feeling that you get on the property has very little to do with the acreage in the side yard, which is the majority of the land on the property, by the way, and it's cleared. It's land that you can easily navigate. And so, it's a little bit of a vanity acreage thing. Does the 3.5 acre property, does that make it more valuable? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's incremental. And that's my point. Does acreage drive some value? Yes. Yes. But not as much as the location, the creek, the topography, zoning, neighborhood home values, soil conditions. All those things are going to drive more value on that land than the acreage by itself. And so you could easily think of a half dozen or more variables that will contribute to land value more than the size of the property. And I want to talk about how to actually find the right property in the right location. Because as I alluded to before in the video, the reason that land gets cheaper as you move further away from the city is because cities have a gravitational pull because they're fundamentally labor markets. So when you get outside of a 60-minute drive from a metro area, the prices start to really drop. And even as you get further out, you're still within 60 minutes drive of the suburbs, and there's a lot of jobs there. But as you pull 1.5, 2.5, 3 hours outside a major metro, the land's going to get a heck of a lot cheaper because even if you're looking for affordable land to build a house, there's fewer jobs there. So if you needed to get a job that connects you to an office location or a physical location, you're generally not going to be making enough money in that location to offset the cost savings of the cheaper land. And this is what a lot of governments run into because they don't really, a lot of urban planners and zoning planners and a lot of these local governments, I mean, they have no issue raising taxes and generating hundreds of millions of dollars for pet projects. The issue is that they don't understand how economics works. They don't understand how incentives work. So affordable housing in rural areas is often not affordable, and it has very little to do with the housing itself. For example, in South Africa, they have a reconstruction and development program called RDP. It's essentially like housing and urban development, but the government gets really involved with these big housing projects. Unlike in the United States a little bit, they do it through private builders and investors and developers with incentives and programs like Section 8. And there's a reason the US government they're not building housing themselves. It's a money pit. It doesn't work well. So it works better as a private industry with government oversight and regulations. So in this RDP program outside of Johannesburg, you have all these people that are low income that can't afford to live in the dwelling units in Johannesburg, largely for zoning, again, largely because of government regulation, where these governments say that the minimum apartment size is this. It's like anything below that, it's not a habitable apartment. Well, the problem is that you're lowering the density in the part of the city where people need to live to get jobs. And you're making this arbitrary distinction between apartments that are livable versus not. And you're putting a high floor underneath the minimum dwelling size. And what you're doing is you're lowering the density where the jobs actually are. You're lowering the housing density where the housing's needed. And you're pushing the housing out into the suburbs and the countryside where there's fewer and fewer jobs, longer and longer commutes. And they found this. There was a province where Johannesburg is located called Gauteng. And there was a housing project where the housing was cheap and they moved a lot of people out of the city, but it backfired. And in this article, it said, as commendable as it was, the RDP has not alleviated economic inequality in South Africa. In fact, it has cemented it by tying families to lands far away from the city and prevented the development of high density housing for the poor. See, what makes a housing affordable is not just the housing, it's the access to the job market. Because the people that were living in these developments outside Johannesburg, their housing was affordable, but they couldn't afford the commute and they couldn't get a job that paid them high enough, close enough to where they lived, where they could make it work. So when you are looking for land, the question is like, do you need proximity to a city? And if not now, will you in the next 3 to 5 years? There's a lot of remote work, guys, but you still have the economics of place. Location has a price. And we can only stay in our Zoom rooms for so long. People connect physically with other people in these local cities, in these towns, in these rural communities too. People want to go to the market. They want to see people in person. A lot of the meaningful connections happen in person. Okay. So where are your people at? Where do you need to be in order to access that? So there's always this tension between acreage and quality, acreage versus convenience, acreage versus job market. And the challenge is that you have to figure out how much land do you really need to find a property that gives you the lifestyle that you want with the quality of life and convenience that you need. And once you find that land, the next question is, how much is that land really worth? And that's going to be the topic of the next video. It's called How to Find Land Values in 60 Seconds. I think you're really going to like it.